Oh, hello. You caught me here reading the book. Well, that's not important. I've been doing the one series focused on a European filmmaker, a Spanish-born filmmaker, often called Jess, but born as Jesus Franco, a very prolific filmmaker of genre film, often called in the his films are often categorized as like Euro sleaze or Euro trash. I kind of messed that up, but going through, he had a very interesting career. He worked with Orson Welles at various points. I think most notably, I believe he was the assistant director on Chimes at Midnight, the John Falstaff movie that Orson Welles made. And if you know much about Orson Welles or watched Dean Martin's show at some point, and you're old, you might know that Orson Welles was really invested in the character of Falstaff. That sounded really weird, but he took material from several plays and kind of condensed that all into Chimes at Midnight. Chimes at Midnight. I feel like I'm saying the title of that film wrong, but it's this I think 1958 Orson Welles movie. That's one of his best put together films. I believe there was a unrealized project, and then there's also, I think, involvement that Jess Franco has with the cobbled together version of Don Quixote that was shot over a bunch of years, and then it's just like very oddly put together because Orson Welles had died at that point, and just was a weird. I think it came out at some point in the not important, but Jess Franco was a very interesting filmmaker because you might have noticed I'm not really talking about. I haven't really talked about whether or not he's good as like there's a distinct degree to which he has a visual sense for what he's doing, but at the same time there is just a general lack of like a lot of the films that I've seen of his just don't have a beginning. It's just you're in the film. There's not like even when there are like these opening sequences, you just have these things where just the film is happening, and it's a little off-putting. It's a degree of almost of amateurishness on some level. It's sort of like a best way amateurism. I don't know if that's the best way, but in the sense that like the Olympics for a long time made a big deal about how these are all amateurs. You cannot be a professional athlete. If that's even the case, actually. But Franco, part one, and it's hard to sort of categorize years because in terms of these films, I kind of think of these as broken up into 1964 films released in 64 and 74, and that for part one. Part one and then part two will be films released between 1979 and 1989. So two 10-year periods of time and films released in those 10-year gaps. With Jess Franco, he was prolific in such a way where even early on, he didn't have So the thing that kind of drew me to Jess Franco is definitely, I would say, on some level, the categorization of him as an anarchist, but of course there's Orson Welles connection. But instantly, upon watching the film, there's just such I don't really, and anytime that someone says aesthetic, I want to die a little bit. There's just such a visual touch to his filmmaking, and he just has such a way with presenting visuals, especially just presenting shots from trees. There's a degree to what Jess Franco does with filmmaking that's certainly engaging with voyeurism, even from the beginning, which is sort of interesting. I'm looking at the back of this 80s book, and there's a image of Isabella Rossellini from Blue Velvet that's sort of throwing me. But let's actually talk about the Jess Franco movies and then how they fit. We start off pretty normal before moving into heavy genre film, but even with that withstanding, we do very much start out with, at least in this watch series before this, Jess Franco had made the awful Dr. Orloff, which is more in I don't know how to describe it, but also there's another, what is it, something, the sadistic Baron von, I'm forgetting. But there's sort of like a weird film that's almost credited as being either like a proto-Galileo, but almost even, because it's not from Italy, I don't think, but it's sort of pointing towards what it would be. Anyway, we're going to start off the Fall of Franco with Franco Noir, and with Death Whistles, Blues, and Rafifi in the City, and these are sort of lower budget B picture noirs, and they're very well made noirs, and they're distinctly noirs, and it says both films which led an impressed Orson Welles to hire Franco as his assistant on Chimes at Midnight, so I got that correct. But the thing about this to note is these are quite impressive early films where you see them and you're just like, that guy, this filmmaker is going places, and these aren't just pot boiler noirs, and I had a lot of fun. And if you enjoy film noir, I would definitely say, without even really talking about these films, because there's not really much to talk about, although they do have some interesting kind of conceits. They're just not, it's mostly in the execution of the films that I think is worth watching them for. So if you're interested in watching some Spanish-made, I believe they're Spain productions, although it's... Anyway, if you would like to see some European noir, I think this Franco Noir set from Severin Films is a pretty good option, and there's granted other things to delve into. There's Polizio Tesco films, however, that's there's sort of like a strain of that kind of verges more into Italian noir from like Ferdinando de Leo, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Jess Franco, and we're talking about the Diabolical Dr. Z, and this is sort of really a beginning. this is like, it's weird, it's a little creepy, but there's just such an inventive, um, it's just got that inventive kind of zing to it that there's this great kind of Black Widow. I don't know if Black Widow is the right word, but there's this like great set of a spider web, and it's very like cheaply done. It's not like super showy, but just entirely from the approach of just a few simple things in terms of shooting it really is elevated to this really like to quite an evocative work, and it's I'm going to read from the back because I'm sort of jobbed to describe it. A stylish medical horror thriller that brings to mind two specific people. One who I'm not super familiar with, George Franco. I don't know if you say that like that. And David Cronenberg, the Diabolical Dr. The vitally important film in the horror cinema's in the horror cinema's transition from spooky scares to a more dreamy and erotic variety that would become the signature Spanish-born director Jess Franco. And then we really get into a section of pure genre and also a beginning kind of hint of some of the exploitation film, although it's not exactly exploitation, but we have the Blood of Fu Manchu, and I think this is also the beginning of the Franco relationship, not necessarily the beginning, but in terms of the watching of films produced by a Harry Alan Towers, who I don't think really, I think he was kind of a weirdo. Um, I think I think Jess Franco was a pervert, and I think Harry Alan Towers was a weirdo. Your Honor, Your Honor.
We concentrate on our own pleasures solely.
The Blood of Fu Manchu is part of this Christopher Lee cycle of Fu Manchu films that were produced by Harry Alan Towers, and they're basically all weird dog shit. But I have two of those films on 4K. Exciting, and I really don't see much in Fu Manchu, and uh, there are some interesting features on these releases, and the character of Fu Manchu's daughter, who's played by Sai Shin, Sai Shin, Sai Chin, I'm sorry, was said something that was very interesting about Christopher Lee, to the effect that he was always complaining about all the makeup that he had to do, and it is quite a bit of makeup to be that racist, but at the same time, no one was really, in a sense, forcing him to do these films. Um, Next up, we have Two Undercover Angels, and that was also we had a release from Kino Lorber via Redemption, and then a Blue Underground release. And next up, we have, I think this might be my favorite just single release so far, um, and that's for two films that are called The Red Lip well, not the red lips, but the characters are like these private investigators slash spies, kind of called the red lips. It's one of those things where it's not really that well defined in the movies, but it's just like, I guess they're called that, because that's also one of the alternate names of the first movies, Two Undercover Angels, which was apparently also released as Sadist Erotica and Red Lips. And then the second movie is Kiss Me Monster. This is a Vinegar Syndrome release, which, no shit. Slipcover release, very 60s art, and these are very weird. I think these are the best works in the kind of Euro spy rom kind of stuff, because when he would more explicitly be doing it in a straightforward manner without some other stuff going on, it's less interesting. The Girl From Rio, another Blue Underground release. This has George Sanders in it. Going to be in one of the Marquis de Sade movies, and I think pulled out, but it's very weird to see George Sanders. Like, Shirley Eden is one thing. There's all these, like, Christopher Lee is one thing, but like George Sanders, a guy that was in All About Eve, like a guy that was in The Picture of Dorian Gray. It's always weird, the films, like some of these films that these people, like Sterling Hayden, George C. Scott, these people that are just these serious actors, and I'm not talking about like, oh, so you mean William Shatner? No, I mean like people that had respected careers, like in film, and not like it's. He's not that good here, and it's a very surreal performance of. I don't know if he was just depressed, but just it's the guy, but you see the charisma just mostly off, and it's just like, okay. Next up, we have the first Marquis de Sade adaptation, and apparently Jess Franco was kind of obsessed with the Marquis de Sade. I don't get it. And this is Justine, and there are films to watch of these, and then there's films to not watch of these.
Oh.
And that's definitely one of the films not to watch. In terms of another film not to watch, there's the Castle of Fu Manchu, which I got these things incredibly discounted, and even I'm like sometimes you just see a movie that makes you just go like, but why? Sort of the idea of this Fall of Franco series is to, it's really to question what are my commitments to things, and how much do I hate myself? enough to watch Philosophy in the Boudoir, which is a film called, also referred to as Eugenie, and then also there's Eugenie, the story of her journey into perversion. Yeah. So in terms of films not to watch, I would also put this in the same category, although there's some really odd stuff going on here. I forgot to actually note it. So in Justine, and if you feel inclined to, I would say don't, but in Justine, there's a performance from Jack Palance that I'm still thinking about. It's not good, but it's like a piece of taffy that you just keep pulling and 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 pulling
No
and
end
pulling
to it.
and pulling, and it's just...
Still we seek for what?
It seems like there's so much...
For what? We do not know. We do not know. We do not know.
And it's just practically unedible garbage by the end.
For what we do not know!
In the Suicide Squad, or it's just, it's not good. It's not, like, I don't think there's any method acting going on. Dear God. But it's just such a weird...
Seize her! Seize her! Seize her! A pleasure shared is not necessarily a pleasure increased. Better.
There's such a bravado to the line. And then in Eugenie, there's a performance from Christopher Lee. He's just kind of there. Speaking of films that Christopher Lee is just kind of there in. This is a really gorgeous 4K release from Severn Films. Really kind of same, more beef case as opposed to, although it's, I don't know how to describe. There's different styles of cases. I don't know if they're all Skenavel cases, but I believe this is a slightly bigger case, or maybe it's a slightly different size of the Skenavel case. But this is Count Dracula, which also has Klaus Kinski, and is one of the first films and few films that we're going to see here with Soledad Miranda. She's probably one of the better parts of the movie. In theory, the idea with this was to do a more faithful adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel, but it's not exactly that, and the only real part of that carries through is the aspect of Dracula being an old man and getting younger as he feels. But that's about it. Following, we have Vampyros Lesbos, and She Killed in Ecstasy. Soledad Miranda. it's really shocking how quickly Jess Franco is able to like find such a distinctive like this way to do what he seemingly has always wanted to do with his films. And just doing more things with vampires and horror and just really actually doing interesting things with vampires and horror. Just there. And just kind of there's ways that people talked about. I recently watched Let's Get Lost, where they're talking about Chet Baker's trumpet playing and this some person was in this esoteric way of being like he's mixing all these I'm not even gonna try and do a voice because that sounded like he's the core of jazz because you have all these things and you can hear this person and you can hear Big Spiderback, and there's this aspect to what Jess Franco starts to do with his films, starting with and moving beyond Vampyros Lesbos, where it's this, and I guess it's there kind of before, but it's not really done in such an interesting, I don't know, and it's probably even there before, but it's this way of mixing, of like bringing in like the aspect of in films like the vamp as like there's this like lingering kind of presence to things where it's, and more you really just get this like long segments of nothing, but it's nothing in a way where it's deeply fascinating and deeply like it's deeply horrific in some cases, but nothing that like it's just this lingering bit of terror in such a way that the great thing about Jess Franco is that he's more than any bit of genre or movies and buzz. There's this real dedication to sort of the camera and to filming in such a way where he's just kind of always obsessed with filming things. So like everything that he films has this like weird angle of, well, that's interesting how that was filmed. Even when what's getting filmed is just like, well, I don't know if that's really a movie. It's not good. But it's made with such a distinct approach and appreciation for cinema that it still compels you past any of the questionable material, at least for me. Next up, we have Dracula, Prisoner of Frankenstein, and this feels like a more this feels more like a film that has just like, if you want to see a Jess Franco film, this is definitely an essential one. And I don't really think it's one of his best, but so we're on our way to the Gap Theater. That's my mom. And I'm gonna try to explain, do a brief crash course on Jess Franco. He is a Spanish-born filmmaker.
From Barcelona?
I don't think he's actually from Barcelona, but
okay.
I just think he did a lot of filming, not necessarily specifically there, but I know he did filming there, and I think
I think for Count Dracula, but I could be wrong. But
Okay.
he did filming in a lot of Spain for a lot of his movies, but I don't really know that the full list I should have actually done, but he made a lot of movies, and his strong suit isn't really so much dialogue. He did a lot of things somewhat cheaply with varying degrees of budget, and when he had large budgets, it's not necessarily like he knew how to really use them to the best effect, although I think he got better at certain points of being able to use budget, but anyway, that's more speculation. He really had a great eye for film, and he was a really good visual storyteller, and just was able to. He had some really good imagery in his films.
In 2 miles, keep left.
Even outside of, like, before this, regardless of the, like, voom voom, I don't know how to like, euphemistic,
Euphemistically?
yeah. The zooms, what like the sexy stuff, that outside of all of that, there's a degree of like filmmaking and appreciation of film in like Jess Franco's work that's it's admirable. He worked with Orson Welles in a capacity at various points, including on Chimes at Midnight, being, I believe, assistant director. Maybe it was more like second. I'm forgetting, second unit. But yeah, we're.
Triple bill at the Gap Theater. We stayed for one movie. They played the 1973 film Female Vampire, which was also released in 74 and 75. And that film had 3 different cuts, and they played probably the worst cut. The longest one, too. But that was a film with Lena Romay, and in terms of essential films, that film and then the next film with Lena Romay that I'm going to talk about are pretty definitively I would say, some of the Franco films, along with Vampyros Lesbos, that just have these very weird approaches to horror. This is sort of like a goofy Dracula, Prisoner Frankenstein is sort of a goofier rom in the vein of Universal monster movie. The Universal Pictures monster movies, insofar as, there's Dracula, there's Frankenstein, but there's also, at the end of the movie, the Wolfman. And then there's some of these films just get increasingly difficult to say the name of. This is Sinner, the Secret Diary of a Nymphomaniac. People seemingly will respond to things, but that's not a thing. That's not a thing. Excuse me while I watch American Psycho. I don't
I don't think the European sleaze Euro trash guy is making documentaries, and I don't think they're even really good films. Now it's a very odd film that is incredibly well made for as fucking weird as it is. This is Lorna the Exorcist, and repeats the same soundbite. It's a very odd film that is incredibly well made for as fucking weird as it is. Lena Romay and Jess Franco have probably one of the most symbiotic, I don't know how to quite describe it, but there's an immediate, even beyond Soledad Miranda, like clicking of these people like are dialed into making the same weird shit, that it's almost cute if what they were making wasn't basically porn at times, if not also very trashy horror movies. It's similar to, like, you see Rob Zombie and the creative relationship that he has with his wife, and at times it's almost to the same degree of that's cute, that's very, like, good for you, but also, what the fuck is going on? What the fuck? Please stop it. But the interesting thing is that throughout these films, there's such a degree of really good music as well that I haven't touched upon. Specifically, there is scores by Bruno Niccioli for Count Dracula that has this very eerie, gothic atmosphere. I don't know if it'd be fair to describe certain things as almost chambered. There's just this really great sound to that specific score, I thought. And further, there's music used in a few different films that, if you're so inclined, I believe with the She Killed in Ecstasy release from separate films, Blu-ray, DVD, and then on the third disc is a CD of the soundtracks for the films used. There's a CD of an album that's used as music for the soundtrack of at least 3 different Jess Franco movies, including Vampyros Lesbos and She Killed in Ecstasy. And that is an album of this, I don't know how to quite, it's not lounge music, it's sort of made in the vein of 60s psychedelic, almost party music, as if that was quite a genre, but it's not really. It's just this very odd sounding music that was, I think, released under an album as Vampire Sound Inc. But even without that, all of the films just have this interesting, there's a